Savvy Central Radio, drawing out the best from their guests with host Christina Nitschmann. Hello everyone, and welcome to Savvy Central Radio. This is your host, Christina Nitschmann. Each week on Savvy, we host successful individuals and business owners, inviting them to share their dreams, stories, wisdom, and lessons learned in their field of business. Our guest today is Dr. Susan P. Cohen of Pet Decisions. Dr. Cohen helps veterinarians and pet owners deal with difficult pet decisions. Dr. Cohen has 32 years as a social worker who specializes in the special needs between people and pets. Today we'll talk about pet loss, what kinds of things we counselors can do in veterinarian settings, the stresses veterinarians face, and how to follow your professional dream. Hi, Susan. Welcome to Savvy Central Radio. How are you?
I'm great, Christina. I hope it's not too cold where you are.
Well, it is a bit chilly over here, a bit nippy, but it's all good. I actually walked the last 20 blocks because the train was having a bit of problem, but it woke me up. That's a good thing about winter, I have to say, that you don't need a cup of coffee in the morning. Just go outside.
That's right. It puts roses in your cheeks. Absolutely.
And I was really blessed to meet you by our awesome friend, Rochelle. And I love the work you're doing with vets and pet owners. Explain for our audience a little bit about your journey and what led to what you're doing right now, helping veterinarians and their owners.
I'm so glad you asked because it really is a journey of love for me. I have had pets my whole life, and I was always attached to them. And even when the cat had kittens and we had to find homes for the kittens, I would cry. And when I got to be an adult, I discovered that I was still really worried if I even thought they were getting sick. And I thought to myself, there really ought to be somebody here to help you. This is hard. And it's long before I became a social worker. But when I became a social worker, I was working with disabled college students. Now, this is back in the day. They mostly had not been taught at home. They had always been taught at home, and they had not been in regular classrooms or been mainstreamed in any way. And I found that many of them were very attached to the animals in their lives. It could be a service dog, could be a pet. And I said, there are a lot of people who really have strong relationships with animals. It's a very positive relationship, and losing that relationship is incredibly painful. And now I'm a social worker, and I thought again, that crazy idea I had that there ought to be somebody to be with you, I really think that's what I want to do. But it was so crazy, who would ever hire you to do that? Well, I found somebody, a very progressive veterinarian named Dr. Bill Kay, who was the head of the Animal Medical Center at that time, which is a big veterinary teaching hospital, and he was willing to give it a go. So that's what we did.
Wow. And so you've worked with a number of veterinarian offices, or?
Well, this is a giant veterinary teaching hospital. It's 8 stories tall. They do all kinds of high-tech medicine. And at the time, we were getting Iowa farm boys who didn't understand why anybody would spend money on a cat or keep a dog in an apartment or cry, and they were just bewildered by New Yorkers and bewildered by pet lovers in general. So part of my job was to work with them and help sensitize them and teach them all the stuff they weren't taught in vet school. And then I worked with the clients to help them figure out what was going on. And it was a kind of an interesting process because there was nothing written about this. So we were, as a group, making this up as we went along. So I started by a lot of people would come in and say, this is the hardest thing I've ever been through. I'm crying more than I cried for my dad. Or I've had a lot of dogs, but this one is really getting to me. So I would ask, what's making this so hard? And there were about 8 or 10 stories that came up over and over and over again about the particular relationship or what was going on in the people's lives. So, for example, somebody might say, we got this dog for my son and he just went off to college. And I think as long as I had, the dog, I had a little piece of him. And so I'm really having to say goodbye to 2 things at once, when something happens to the pet. And then for the veterinarians, I would say, I would just hang out with them. and say, hey, what's going on? What's life like? And that's how I found out they were all heavily stressed, which nobody had identified as an issue. Nobody was dealing with, because it was kind of a tough guy atmosphere, whether you were a man or a woman, and you just didn't show emotion and you weren't supposed to have any problems. And that was true. People were, far away from home and dealing with upset people and upset clients. And then, I watched what the clients needed, and I listened to them and tried to teach the veterinarians how to give clients what they needed. And I think, Christina, that by just being there, it empowered the doctors to try some things they hadn't tried before. I mean, I taught them basic communication skills and all of that. But I think knowing there was somebody in the building they could call allowed them to not be so afraid of their clients and to go ahead and open themselves up to the client's feelings and the client's issues. And what I did was I always thought of myself as axle grease, just going around the hospital trying to make everything run more smoothly for everyone.
Yeah, and it's amazing how important that third party that I met someone last year who came on my show. She's a mediator, and I didn't know that such a thing existed for divorce mediation. And I was like blown away, because I was like, it's fabulous, because you get into an office where you're going to go and really take a bond that was very deep and then go take it to the, a lawyer and a judge, and it's very impersonal. And to have this other third party come in and help everyone deal with the emotions around it, it's invaluable.
I think you're absolutely right. And frankly, Christine, sometimes one of the most useful things I could do, because I would go in the room with people. First, I'd walk around the waiting room and find people. And my question to myself always was, do I have to worry about you or not? So if a person says, oh, I'm just having my young cat spayed and I've been through this a million times and it's already happened and she's fine, I don't have to worry about that person. But if someone comes in and says, wow, this is a really big place. I guess that's why my doctor sent me here. My pet was sneezing and a little blood came out, and I guess it's a cold, but really she hasn't been eating for a few days and we've never been separated. Do I have to worry about this person? Yes, I do. So I would sit down and chat with that person and then go into the exam room and help facilitate that conversation. And sometimes the most useful thing I did in that room was just breathe deeply. And people weren't conscious that they were hearing it, but they were hearing it. And the doctor would calm down and the client would calm down and we could have a real conversation. And as you said, being the third person in the room, I'm not caught up on either set of information. I can just listen to the exchange and kind of help smooth it along, like that axle grease I mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking, I was a little really surprised when you mentioned that some of the veterinarians were not really emotionally in tune, because I just assumed that going in to become a veterinarian that you would have been head over heels with dogs and cats and or whatever animals, and that you would be overly emotional about things that happen in the office. But I'm also guessing maybe that's kind of really hard to do when it's your job.
Well, remember when this is. This is the 1980s. So the first year that I got to this big veterinary teaching hospital was the last year it was mostly men. After that, it became mostly women, and it stopped being farm boys and started being pet lovers of, male, female, that wasn't the issue. It wasn't the gender thing. It was the fact that they had grown up with pets. And so they understood so much better what people were going through. And because we initiated a lot of training programs and stress management, other vet schools and some big practices started saying, wow, maybe we should be doing that for our students. So everybody at our place was a licensed veterinarian, but they'd gone through the old training system where not only were they not taught this, they were really discouraged from feeling anything or getting involved with the client's emotions. And they didn't know how to shape the interview. So they were a little afraid that if someone, for example, came in and said just what you said, this is coming at a particularly bad time because my husband and I are getting divorced. Well, if they allowed themselves to hear that at all, they didn't know what to do with it. So I could teach them, well, that's information that you need to know because it might affect how much money there is to spend on the care of this pet, or who's going to make the decisions, or where the pet's going to go to recover, that kind of thing. You don't have to get involved and be their family therapist, but you need to listen to that when somebody says it to you. They are not just trying to talk to you to, have a new friend. They're really trying to tell you something.
Yeah.
So, that worked out very well.
So in essence, you're just saying that there's important clues in there from the patient, and just to listen in because it could have a relevance on the practice and you as a doctor.
Absolutely. So since then, that's been a big part of what I've done is I think help people not be afraid of emotion and afraid of the people around them. It got to be a much more humane situation for everybody, I think. And we had wonderful veterinarians. I wasn't there because they were jerks. I was there because they didn't have time. And in the beginning, they didn't have the training to do, the things that a veterinarian we now expect can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And now this brings me to another question I'm thinking about, because we're getting close to the holiday times, and I know that often I hear about a lot of pets dying at this time, and it's a more stressful time than other parts of the year that a pet might die just because of the time of year it is, with presents and holidays and all the stress. How did that work out in the practices in which you served?
That's a very interesting issue. And the reason I say that is because the first year I was there, I started in September. And the first big holiday that came up was Thanksgiving. And I found out that a lot of people came in and euthanized their pets on Thanksgiving. I thought, well, that's bizarre. But you know what it turned out? It was that everybody was home. The kids had come home from college, Uncle Harry was in visiting, whatever. And everybody could take a look at Fluffy and say, you know what? She's really not doing well, and I think maybe it's time. And they would go to the hospital as a group to do the euthanasia so they could all say goodbye. And again, you had maybe a fresh perspective on what was really going on. So that was my introduction to holidays and pet loss.
Wow.
Of course, as you said, there are a lot of things wrapped up in this relationship. And so you remember all the Thanksgiving dinners when you snuck the dog, a little bit of turkey under the table, or how you always got a catnip mouse for the cat, or a new toy for your parrot. And so when that holiday comes around, it's a gift-giving occasion, maybe it's a birthday, whatever, and they're not there. It's very painful. They're going to be, especially in that first year, many of those kinds of triggers. Oh, the leaves have come down, and oh, she really loved to run and, run through the pile of leaves. So, holidays, special events, changes in the weather can be painful. So, what you want to do is, first of all, try to find yourself a support system. So these days, for a lot of people, it's Facebook. For people who use Facebook, they'll put out there, hey, I just lost my pet, or I'm feeling particularly bad because it's Thanksgiving and she's not under the table for me to slip food to. And your friends will very often come through for you. And, tell funny stories or just send you a virtual hug. You may actually, if it's really painful, want to see if you can find a pet loss support group. We started the first pet loss support group that I know of in the country, the first professionally run one. And when I wrote that job description, I knew there had to be a group. That was very unusual at the time. There was AA, and that was about the only support group out there. And I knew that if we brought everybody together in the same room so that they could tell stories, they would know, A, they're not crazy, B, they're also probably not responsible for anything that happened. And nobody's going to interrupt them and say, yeah. How about the Mets? What do you think they're going to do this year? Right?
Yeah.
Because that was, people were very uncomfortable back in the day and really had a hard time talking about it. So getting back to the holidays, you want to look for some sort of a support network, whether it's your friends, your Facebook friends, an actual professional support group. And you can think about things to do in your pet's memory. It's kind of a nice end of the year thing to do. So donate money, go volunteer at a pet shelter, do some other kind of thing that you do to celebrate the life of the one you love. Or you might want to craft something, needlepoint a portrait of your pet, or do some sort of a keepsake box. Some people put up what they call altars on, say, a mantelpiece, which is, usually just a picture of the pet and maybe a candle or, a favorite toy, something like that. So that you're doing something, positive that you do with your pet in mind, but that helps you get through these really hard times.
Wow, those are awesome tips. And I don't know if I remember telling you about it, but there's a show I like to listen to called Talk to the Animals by a friend of mine named Janet Roper.
Uh-huh.
Well, she actually runs a show and has a lot of people on talking about their pain and struggle of their pet dying. And the show is really directed towards animals, but they often have sympathy and helping people deal with the loss of an animal. Because if you have an animal, it's going to come up eventually that they might die or get sick or God knows what. So I think you might like it.
Sounds great. And, another thing that can make the holidays hard when you've lost a pet, sometimes it's your family that you're having a hard time with, or you're feeling very lonely. And you were never alone on New Year's Eve because you and the 3 cats, would all curl up and watch the ball drop and whatever. And so sometimes it was having a pet that got you through the holidays that might have been difficult for other reasons. And so when you've lost the support of the pet, it can be pretty tough.
And I don't think some understand that, because my boyfriend's very like, well, pets are just pets. They're not family members. And for me, my dog was my best friend growing up. He followed me everywhere. And so for me, it's not just an animal. It is literally a friend. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah, and I think the same for a lot of people. And so now going back to the question of an owner coming in with a sick pet or maybe a pet that has to be put down, how do you help them through that, that decision, or going through that at, when they're at the veterinarian office?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, the first thing you do is sit down and have a conversation and see what's going on. And some people you meet are not going to have a problem. Even if it's a euthanasia, they've worked their way up to this. They're prepared. Everybody's together. And of course, it's sad, but they don't really need any extra support. You usually need to give support to people who are confused. So, for example, the situation I told you about before. You come in thinking this isn't any big deal. You're not quite sure why you're at the vet's, but, something's been going on. And somebody comes out and says, oh, this sounds serious. This could be diabetes, and you're going to have to give injections, and measure things. Or this could be cancer, and then we're looking at surgery and radiation therapy, and that's going to be X thousands of dollars. You're stunned. It's hard to even take the information in. So the first thing I would do is stand with you, breathe deeply. So everybody was calm. And then I would say, what do you think about what the doctor said? Now, some people could repeat back to you exactly what the doctor said, and some people just had no idea because they were in a state of shock. So then we could work out what the doctor said and what questions we have to ask. And then, of course, if you're not living all by yourself, you have to go home and deal with other people in your life who get a vote, or who maybe have to say something about have some say over the money, or have an opinion. And that's sometimes one of the problems, because not only do you have all the people in your life who are going to have vastly different opinions about the role of pets and what you ought to be doing, you have the entire internet. So you can get on the internet and you're going to get, oh, that's a stupid idea. That doctor's an idiot. You should go to my doctor. Don't do any of that. Do herbs. How can you even think about not spending $10,000 to save this pet? Too bad about your other needs. So it can be very confusing. And so I was your list sounding board. I wasn't going to tell you what to do, but I knew what questions to ask, and one of the things that always comes down to is costs and benefits. And that's not just money. That's what is the pet going to have to go through? How long will this last? Does your cat ride comfortably in a carrier, or does he freak out? What else is going on? Because in the end, you're making a trade. money, time, your heart, what other people think you ought to be doing with your time versus having your pet around longer, knowing that you succeeded in, winning the day. And you have to understand exactly what your choice is here. And that means talking to your veterinarian very carefully, really understanding and really taking a little time to figure it out. So that was my job. I would walk people through that process. I would ask them those questions to help them decide for themselves what their limits were and what they were willing to do. And there wasn't a right or wrong about it. If somebody comes in and says, I wouldn't spend $25, if I could get a new cat for that. We didn't get many of those, but okay, that's a stance. And other people would, give up their entire life savings to buy 6 more weeks. So it's not that there's a right or wrong, but you want to understand what you're getting into. And that was my job. And then to help them understand how veterinary medicine works and why they can't give you an answer right away and whether or not they really do need to do those tests, not because I'm a veterinarian, but because I've heard a lot of stories. And I know how to ask the questions of the veterinarian and of the client.
And it must have been really tough at times, because I can imagine that there were some owners that really wanted maybe to keep furry around a bit longer, and it was going to cost more than they could afford. And that's a really tough choice to have them work through that. I can't afford this. He is suffering. I don't like the option, but sometimes I have to go that direction.
Exactly. And I think that's where the issue of costs and benefits comes up again. Because when I had somebody who would say, "Oh, I'll bet if I were Bill Gates, I could pay for everything and I could keep my pet alive." A lot of times it wasn't a matter of the money. It might seem like it at first, but it really wasn't, because I would say to them, suppose they said to you, "It's $10,000 right now, but you're going to get back a 1-year-old perfectly healthy dog." Almost everybody would say, "Oh, I would sell my jewelry." I mean, that was never your choice. Your choice was maybe $10,000 to buy maybe 6 more months with a pet who already had other health issues. So if you could beat the cancer, your cat still had kidney failure or whatever. So, that's why having a very careful discussion with everybody and making sure that the veterinarians are explaining, and they did a fabulous job. Most veterinarians I've met have been very caring and really pretty good explainers, specifically for the reason you said, which is the client is paying the bill. And so, where in human medicine, they might just order up tests or whatever and not really have a lot of discussion with you about it because insurance is covering it. In veterinary medicine, most people are paying their own bills. Pet insurance is it's not a new thing, but it's just beginning to catch on. I think most veterinarians are good and careful about explaining what people's choices are.
Yeah, I can totally see where you're coming from. And through all of your experiences working with veterinarians and pet owners, what has come across for you as the greatest lesson you've learned through watching all of this?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I think for me, it's how much people really love their pets. It is when people say, "This is my family," that's what they mean. And I think, one of the first day I was in social work school, the first lesson we learned was start where the client is. And what that means is don't start where you think they ought to be or where you imagine they are. You have to start where they are. And that was an enormously helpful piece of advice that really has carried me through my career, because now I'm not just working at one place. I'm consulting with a variety of practices. I'm lecturing at different conferences and so on. So I'm getting to meet people who have all different kinds of practices. Some of them are very high tech, high end, and I think there's a feeling on veterinarians that they all have to operate that way, and which puts a lot of financial pressure on them. And then I've just started a website, which we'll talk about later, but part of the reason I did that was so that I can reach more clients, so reach more veterinarians, reach more clients, and share this kind of, experience of many decades now.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we, move on here, let the audience know how they can contact you, find out more about you, which is on your new website. Tell them a little about that.
Thank you so much. Well, I just started, and I'm inordinately proud of it that we finally got there. It's called Pet Decisions, petdecisions.com. And to me, that sort of summarized what I'm on this earth to do, is help people, veterinarians and clients and animal lovers and other professionals, make decisions they can live with. I want everybody to go out of this encounter feeling peaceful. So I've been teaching veterinarians communication and stress management because they're going through a rough time as a profession. They have heavy debt. There's a lot of competition. As I said, there's a big demand for this kind of high-end equipment and medicine. And you have clients who love their pets as much as anybody could love anything, who can't just pay for absolutely everything that could possibly be tried. So it's very stressful on the veterinarians, and that's a lot of what I do is help support them. And then, help them have the best kind of communication, not just with the client, but within their own practice. So if a practice is having some difficulty, interpersonal problems, the boss wants everybody to get involved in this fun run and nobody wants to do it. Like, how do you tell the boss, it's too much already? There's too much on my plate. So I've worked with practices about that kind of stuff. So if you go to petdecisions.com, I've just started blogging. I have lots of ideas for more blogs. And you'll get to read my entire background and see what I'm all about and hopefully see where I'm coming from. Because I want to help you, whether you are the pet lover or you are the veterinarian or you are another kind of helping professional who wants to get involved in animal-assisted therapy or whatever. I want to help you get where you need to go in a healthy, peaceful way.
Awesome. Well, I shall probably be calling on your services, being I plan to get a Yorkie this year, so I'm really...
Oh!
Yay.
Do you have one picked out? Male, female?
No, I don't have it picked out yet. I've been going to the local shelters and to the pound, hoping to get one that I can rescue, so I'm keeping my eyes out, and he will show up soon. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, a New York is in your future.
Yeah. Well, it's been awesome having you out here, Dr. Susan Cohen, and sharing your wonderful gifts and talents. Before we head on out, is there any last words of advice you'd like to leave pet owners and any veterinarians out there?
I think for pet owners, you have to take yourself seriously. I think understand that this is a real relationship. You deserve to love this much and to hurt this much. So ask all the questions you can think of. The doctor wants to be helpful. So write them down. Take pictures on your cell phone if crazy things are going on at home, so that because animals will pull it together when they get to the vet and they all of a sudden they quit limping, or whatever. So take pictures, bring it in, provide as much information about your pet and yourself as you can, so the veterinarian knows where you're coming from. And for veterinarians and for really anybody who wants to be in this field, I would say, think about what you're good at and look around and see what needs doing. And do that. This idea I had was a completely crazy idea. And I found somebody who would let me try it. I've had a whole career, and there's a whole field now of helping professionals who work in this area. And that's because I got lucky. I got lucky and found somebody who was willing to try. If you have identified a service that needs doing, and it taps into the things you're good at, you got a good shot here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would call it less lucky than actually you took a step out and said, this is a passion. Let me see where I can live it. And it worked out because you were willing to take that step.
It was, I'll be honest, the scariest thing I've practically ever done in my life, because I am not a big risk taker. And I had a perfectly wonderful job at the university, but I could not fail to try this. And it worked out.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I know you've helped many, many, many veterinarians and pet owners out there, and many more to come.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been lovely talking with you, Christina.
It's been awesome talking with you, Dr. Susan Cohen, and thank you again for coming to Savvy Central Radio.
My pleasure.
For those interested in joining our Savvy family or being a paid sponsor or interviewing with us, contact us at savvycentralradio@gmail.com or 718-713-2289. And remember, we want to host the programming you're interested in. If you have a guest you'd like to hear on Savvy or a topic you'd like us to cover, please let us know. Our sponsor for this episode is Audible. Audible content includes over 100,000 audio programs from more than 1,800 content providers, which include leading audio publishers, broadcasters, entertainers, magazine and newspaper publishers, and business information providers, and can be digitally downloaded and played on over 500 popular devices. Sign up now for your free 30-day trial at audibletrial.com/SavvyCentral.